Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to welcome you to this performance. The one thing I'd like to say about the label of sick comedian, which I think is a misnomer, what perhaps is as a short explanation to the people who don't understand what he does, it is not that per se is a sick comedian, but comments, reflects, holds up the mirror, so to speak, to the sick elements in our society that should be reflected upon and that should be spoken about. And so at this time, ladies and gentlemen, Lenny Bruce.
Alternative comedy is a term that used to refer to a specific group of performers who rose to the forefront of the comedy scene back in the 80s. The comic strip stars Rick Mayall, Jennifer Saunders and most predominantly Alexei Sayle. But now it exists as an umbrella term for comedy that bucks the mainstream trend. It's been my dream to join the ranks of alternative comedians since I began my foray into amateur stand-up, but do I really know what it means to be alternative? Or have I just become so obsessed with what I am opposed to that I've lost what I actually want to be? Okay, before I go further, let's go back to Dada. Dada was an art movement that prioritised nonsense, irrationality and a distinctly anti-bourgeois approach to artwork, railing against the aestheticism of post-World War I capitalist society. And you say, but Dada's about paintings, that's nothing to do with performance. But, poor helpless straw man, you'd be wrong, because Dada, just like stand-up, first came face-to-face with the public in a nightclub founded by Hugo Ball, a little place in Zurich called Cabaret Voltaire. Okay, back to a much more present-day setting. This is the Indie Lounge, the bar in Selly Oak that acts as our Cabaret Voltaire. Yeah, okay, it's a bit rich to compare the karaoke nights, poetry slams and of course stand-up comedy that takes place here to those revolutionary performances of 100 years ago. But you get the picture. It's a space to test out our ideas in the presence of our friends and peers. With one stipulation.
Please don't heckle and stuff like that. Like, we've had like sort of no heckling, and the only heckling has been like controlled heckling that people have wanted.
I completely understand why this exists. We want to create an atmosphere where terrified first-timers can try out their jokes in a supportive and engaged environment. But words of support aren't always totally constructive. The first response I got from another comic after stepping down from my first set was, "That was so much like Harry Hill's early stuff." Alright, it was probably a bit presumptuous to think my first set would be groundbreaking and wholly original. And it's not an insult, that's cool, I like Harry Hill's stand-up, it's such a bombardment of the senses, but this is the critical problem with modern audiences. It's a result of cultural mediatisation. This is the process by which the media we consume influences and infects the ways we relate to each other, and the ways in which we engage with art in all of its forms. Everything can and must be described in relation to something else. That's how we market it. This process was in its infancy at the time of Cabaret Voltaire, but now in the internet age, where everyone has immediate access to content that reinforces their core beliefs, it is utterly rampant. All right, mate, calm down. It was an offhand comment. Yeah, but alternative comedy is supposed to subvert, not reinforce expectations. And if audiences aren't open to have their expectations subverted, then...
I embrace the idea that there's a new demystification process going on between the artist and the audience.
That's David Bowie.
So from my standpoint, being an artist, I like to see what the new construction is between artist and audience. There is a breakdown. There's
You probably know that.
Where the audience is at least as important as whoever is playing.
Not a comedian, but got some pretty relevant comments here, but you know what, I don't need to tell you everything.
And the internet is now, carries the flag of being subversive and possibly rebellious and chaotic, nihilistic and...
Quick round of applause for Jeremy Paxman there, who manages to sum up in one disparaging frown what I'm going to try and say in 20 minutes. But Alfred, don't be a hypocrite. Of course the internet has changed the way in which audiences engage with artists. You wouldn't have discovered half of your key influences without the help of the magnificent digital archive. True, but isn't that the problem? Who's to say that I'm actually meant to be a stand-up comedian? To explain, say hello to two people. First up, Jean Baudrillard. Baudrillard pioneered the concept of hyperreality, a key feature of which is the argument that in the modern world, the unconscious mind has become colonised by external images in the form of popular culture. Got that? Okay. Rewind to Hannah Hogg, a Dada artist who became infamous for her photo montages, artworks collated from snippets of printed material. She used external images to construct new signifiers of meaning. So, take successive generations of human beings, immerse them in hyperreality on a near constant basis, and you get you and me. A society not of distinct individuals, but distinct montages, who spend their lives exchanging time for further images to add to the collage. The media would have us believe that everyone has some innate creative destiny, just waiting to be tapped into.
Couldn't have that. You didn't want me. Was that it, Joel?
Who's Joel?
What?
Who's Joel?
My husband.
We can't hear you.
Sorry. Joel is my husband of 4 years, and tonight he left.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yep, he left.
But destiny is dead, and we are constructed from the outside in.
When Bill first started, you could see Woody Allen. He actually had the Woody Allen mannerisms a bit.
After seeing one of his stand-up routines, Woody Allen was completely fascinated. Starting then, all he ever wanted was to make jokes exactly like Mort Sahl.
But that's not a bad thing. If you keep doing it and you don't grow out of it, that's a bad thing. But you can tell when a comic first starts who its influence might be.
This sounds so terrible, but I actually don't really watch a lot of stand-up comedy, which is terrible.
I now actually try and avoid it as much as possible.
I can't sit down and watch Live at the Apollo. So just or Michael fucking McIntyre, I can't stand him. I remember seeing Nina Conti at Fringe ages ago. I tend to just chat so much shit.
I really actually hate watching stand-up on TV or Live at the Apollo or anything like that, because I'm just so desperately worried that I'm gonna emulate things or accidentally plagiarise.
I'm probably not copying someone, or not that I know of. And she was obviously amazing, really good. I remember I did this weird ventriloquist show at school after that, because I just stole her idea basically.
But I did a PowerPoint on why Abraham a sin. I'm sure someone out there's done that, but I've never seen it.
Because I don't have a massive sort of grasp of who I am as a person, or certainly didn't at 18 or however old I was.
And sometimes I come up with jokes and I'll see it on Twitter once about especially about politics.
I was following the same beats and sort of manners of speaking as stand-ups that I thought were better than me.
They've literally been doing it for 20 years, and they've been lucky, and they've been really good.
And then as soon as I see it, I'm I can't use that anymore because someone's going to think that I've copied it. And so,
on one hand, I was imitating my friend Matt, who was the only person who I knew who did stand-up at the time, and I thought he was absolutely brilliant. So I was trying to pretend to be him. And the problem was he was also trying to pretend to be Matt Berry, so it was just 3 layers of removal.
See, I was always oh, I'm not going to be one of them ones that just talks about sex and stuff like that. I find the most motivational to watch is I just watch shorter videos every once in a while, and I go, I can do that.
Everything starts as imitation, and that isn't just a problem for performers, it's a problem for audiences too. We rely on them to fill seats, and the internet has provided them with the freedom to curate what they engage with, based on their preferences, which are in turn curated by what they've already seen, and so on and so forth. Meaning that even if someone considers themselves alternative to the mainstream,
the expectations people go into watching stand-up is I really want to see someone who's the new James Acaster.
James Acaster, I think.
The natural person often to cling to is James Acaster.
I like James Acaster.
I think everyone's probably said it, I do love James Acaster.
I like James Acaster.
So everyone does.
Fuck me! The You're so fucking welcome. What is it, a motherfucking Tuesday?
So why is James Acaster my generation's kingpin of alternative comedy? Controversial opinion, but I'd say this is largely due to the success of Repertoire, his series of 4 interconnected Netflix specials, and not his popularity on the stand-up circuit.
Don't sulk about it. Look, it's no hard feelings, mate.
Repertoire is complex, and the stories are interwoven in a way that only the audiences at home have time to comprehend and dissect. The live audiences for these shows are unaware that they're missing out on the whole by attending in person, and why should they think otherwise? Stand-up relies on live audiences, so it seems almost unfair to belittle their contribution. But that's what's happening across the community. It's no secret that stand-up embodies and intensifies many of the anxieties that come with performance. We fear you, but we also love you and need you.
March 2020 was my first stand-up set. And it was virtual. Talking peak COVID.
So the best gig I've ever done was it was called Queer as Joke, and it was a LGBT comedy night for LGBT people. I was standing and I was performing to a room full of bears.
But yeah, I remember, just looking at faces while laughing, but nothing coming out of them. It was just a bit emojis. There was a thumbs up on one. I thought, I'm going in the right direction here.
That's what I mean, I think they're gonna be twats, so they won't laugh at my joke. No, I don't really like that. I mean, just I think stand-up audience can be quite I don't know, always stand-up audience. I think I don't know. I fear I get a horrible group of men on the front row and get off the stage. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
With the Edinburgh Fringe, I will not be able to turn around and place it.
It's not necessarily the audience. I feel harsh to be it's because the audience is twats. It's not because the audience is twats. The biggest.
Move on.
So maybe in a way, if Edinburgh Fringe is shit, that's a good thing, because then I'll do more sets afterwards.
I'm gonna have to figure out what the middle point is between all of the different vibes I like to give off.
But I just remember though, it was such a lovely audience and people were laughing and stuff and just smiling at me and stuff like that. And I just remember getting such a buzz from it at the end. And then it was real, Harriet Kemsley was there, who from Cats Was Camped On and stuff. And she was you're really funny, wow, I can't believe that's your first stand-up set. So that was sort of just a boost of confidence.
What the diversification of stand-up into alternative mediums has done is give performers avenues to escape unpredictable audiences. Yes, that's right. Just as audiences can curate the content they consume, so too can performers curate the audiences that consume their content. Abby Clark is a young comedian who claims the clientele of her live gigs tended to be 50-year-old men with beer. By translating her brand of observational comedy into bite-sized TikToks, she managed to curate the audience of young women she'd always sought, who in turn would fill up seats in her live gigs. I'll admit that's the problem with live gigs. Just as in digital spaces, they're never impartial, but it seems like a measure of success in stand-up has started to become how well you've managed to escape the baptism of fire that are random audiences by constructing a mutually beneficial echo chamber between yourself and your fans.
N.A. Connolly's show is an immediate sellout and could be half a dozen times over. His long-playing records outstrip pop stars like the Osmonds. They queued round the block to buy his last one, and already it's sold well over 250,000 copies. He's adored all over Scotland in general, and in his hometown, Glasgow, in particular. What's even more interesting is that his humour seems to cross all barriers of age and class. He's an out-and-out socialist and doesn't mind saying so. He's very often outrageously irreverent and makes the odd biting social comment. But on the whole, his patter just rambles on, taking his audience by the hand through situations and places they already know, but haven't seen the funny side of before. Like most great comedians, Billy had a tough start in life.
And fans are the watchword. Popularity is kind of the elephant in the room for any kind of artistic production. Yes, I can sit here and tell you how someone should become a stand-up comedian in a way that's both meritocratic and moral, but will that lead to success? Fuck no. And I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't admit that potential popularity has become a concern when I'm devising my sets. Selling out is enticing because it leads to sold-out shows. But unlike someone like Midge Maisel, most of us don't wander into the spotlight, drawn by a thread of fate and our natural, honest comedic sensibilities. That path is closed to us who live in the real world. We're all empty constructs swimming through lakes of postmodern excrement, hoping that just enough sticks so that when we stagger dry-eyed from the fibre optic mire, we'll have enough to be judged worthy of creating something that has substance. It's not very interesting. I don't know. Is it a substance? That was just weird, wasn't it? I can see that as the thing. What is a fibre optic mire? Yeah, Bo Burnham is another performer that transitioned from highly constructed digital content to live performances. He avoided the circuit entirely and tried to replicate the snappy editing in his videos in tightly scripted stand-up specials. Arguably brilliant, but undeniably self-destructive.
Come and watch the skinny kid with a steadily declining mental health, and laugh as he attempts to give you what he cannot give himself.
I had my first panic attack on stage.
How did the show continue?
It continued. Yeah, I've had about 10 on stage. What's so weird about it is that it's happening within the structure of a show that is written about but to the word, you know what I mean?
That there's a considerable difference, it seems to me, between your great public pronouncements, savage statements against the BBC and against commercial television and against the government, against the world.
Yes, right, Howard, yes.
But in fact, all these goon shows and so on, they're very gentle, aren't they? All this verse, you're very you're non-satirical in your work, but you project a great satirical front.
Well, now, I'm not an intellectual, therefore I cannot write satire. I feel violently about things, terribly violently, but I'm not a violent person. I've never struck, I struck one bloke in my life, that's all. But I've never struck more than one boy in my life, at a time, that is. And consequently, what I say is the reverse of impact, but it has it rebounds twice as strong. You know what I mean?
No, I don't.
Alternative comedy especially is facing an issue with this perception of substance. These highly constructed and intricate performances from the likes of Bo Burnham and James Acaster are not sustainable. But how else do we convince audiences that it is worthwhile spending their time watching our shows? And time is the issue, not quality. We're now not just competing in the live space for physical audiences, although that now is starting to present its own issues. As creatives, it is expected that you are competing constantly with everything. You need to find a way to be everywhere, all of the time. Start a podcast, write a book no one needs to read, make some TikToks, follow a YouTube trend, divide up your stand-up into easily digestible slices that people can share and imprint in their minds like personality stickers.
You have any idea how demeaning this job is? Night after night, I'm the one out of everyone in the room who knows the most about comedy, and I've got to win your approval. That is fucking demeaning. Makes no sense. All of you sitting there. I saw an episode of McIntyre's Roadshow once. I think that makes me quite the connoisseur. I've heard of Brass Eye. Impress me.
At this point, you're probably asking, God, what needs to happen for this guy to be satisfied? And the truth is, I don't know. It's quite difficult to criticise the failings of the chaotic hyper-reality that we live in when I only exist because of it. I even have nostalgia for an era of alternative comedy that I have no memory of. I've sought out comedy based on my own interests. I'm just as much a curated audience member as the rest of them. The digital space is quickly becoming the space that matters the most. And I'll admit, I'm terrified of stepping into that arena as a content creator. I know it's the avenue's success, but it just feels so permanent. I only have films of a few of my performances, and they're the ones that I agonise over constantly. Oh, looks like he's about to perform now. What's going to be the opening gambit? Oh, he's going to start with a slightly absurd visual gag. That'll get everyone on board. Yeah, looks like it hasn't. I'd say that one is most definitely in the rough. Oh, here comes a Gollum impression within 30 seconds of the performance. When is he going to kick into the proper jokes? About now. Alright, perfect. And cue left.
So, welcome to Footnotes' first one-night stand-up in the Indian.
Don't get me wrong, by no means am I the underdog, but I'm not truly some privileged parasite either. I exist somewhere in the middle, a sort of benign tapeworm of the comedy scene. The most important freedom in comedy, in my opinion, is the freedom to fail and then try again. And I'm grateful that I'm privileged enough to have had that freedom. For a long time I feared going to Edinburgh Fringe because to me that seemed like the end of the prologue of my career.
I think Edinburgh Fringe will be, the height of my comedy, pursuing.
And I'm actually I'm gonna get a bit emotional. I'm actually really sad to be leaving. I mean, I feel like it's gonna be the peak of my life. I can't, because I'm not expecting really to be doing big things, but
you making jokes on stage, and I was like, yeah. And they were like, oh right, well, probably need to be funny then. They were a bit savage about it probably.
Like Fringe, I went in 2019 to just see some shows, and I remember writing it on my bucket list. I would like to perform at Edinburgh Fringe.
Being able to give other people a platform as well to do stand-up.
So going was just, it was just a dream.
I think you have to be a little bit chaotic. I think otherwise you wouldn't, if you were thinking rationally, you'd never actually want to get up and do these kind of things, because it's a strange thing to do, and it is.
But I don't think I'll have a lasting legacy, Alfred. I don't think there's any legacy there to speak of. Well, when I think of my stand-up, I think of that first set online, and I think that sums it up.
My generation has come of age surrounded by total noise. What does it take to become the best? The internet in the age events. In fact, I can benefit from enjoying that, especially modern days where we've got audiences so many now. It would be through something like TV, but also DVD access to judgments. In Netflix specials, there's no just. They suddenly assume funny, comedy is much harder than one space that is to build financial down, enjoy video, love or hate, want to relax. That with every next step I needed to be sure of myself and be fully formed, whereas being anonymous gave me the chance to experiment and freely self-criticise. While I was at Fringe, I was sharing a room with one of the other stand-ups, and I'd been complaining about my set and the way it had gone, and just before he went to sleep in his groggy state, he said, quite calmly, "I think you just enjoy beating yourself up." And it's true. Ooh, maybe I could write a set about that. Just joking. But if anything, the process of making this documentary has really proved to me that I might be a hollow collage of my inspirations, but if I'm going to become anything, I need to stop beating myself up about being incomplete. And it's also a warning, really, to myself that if this is what I think stand-up has become, do I really want to be part of that world? Yes.
It's awfully considerate of you to